I've been interested in why people believe what they believe for most of my life, from places like this Celtic fort to the changing faces of Christianity and the expansion and integration of Islam. People have always tried to make sense of the world around them. History, faith and psychology can all inform how we find our place in the world and the universe. In this series I will be exploring neuroscience, psychology, belief and the universe itself. This is Interviews with Richard Gilliver.
Today I have a very, very special guest. I am joined today by the author of A Human History of Emotion. He's one of the world's leading experts on disgust and emotions. It's a small world, in fact, because I first met you, Richard, close to 20 years ago when I was friends with your now wife.
Yes, a long time ago. I met my wife 42 years ago, so yeah. Oh my God, how old am I?
We're here to talk about your book, and we'll get straight off by saying the blurb for your book describes it as a sweeping exploration of emotions and how they shaped the course of human history. In this book, you go from Plato and Socrates to the Buddha, Ya Asantewa, and that's one of my favorite chapters, to psychology, neurology, politics and war. How did you go about putting all that together? Because it is vast in its scope.
I read too much. I really shouldn't read as much as I do. I wanted to do something it's a very big topic, and there's a lot of academics doing, but everything that's been published so far pretty much has been really academic. I mean, really sort of dense and hard to read kind of stuff, and I wanted to introduce the world to this topic that I study, which I think is fascinating and interesting, and so I thought, well, I need to here's a brief look at everything. I'm going to dip my toe in every little area and show you how widespread and how important this kind of history actually is. And then I read too much. I read a lot.
I mean, that must have been some reading, because you literally touch on everything. I mean, I mentioned a good few things that you go into there, but that's probably not even a tenth of the subjects you touch upon.
Well, about half of it are sort of core things within my field, things we all have to read to get our history of emotion badges. Things like, things like the old John Riley Smith work on love and the Crusades. That goes way back. And if you've even studied the Crusades or you've studied history of emotions, you must have read it. So about half the book I could write in about a month without doing too much, because it's just stuff I knew. The other half, that's where I got down and read and got into stuff like Ya Asantewa and some of the old Indian ideas and that kind of thing, which was great. I like to learn. So it's within my field, and I expanded on it. But yeah, about half of it was easy. The other half was not.
How did you come up on those things? I mean, we've mentioned Ya Asantewa. Was that stuff that you were specifically looking for, or was it just something you kind of chanced upon and thought, that'd be brilliant in my book?
I wanted to make it a book that covered the world. There's lots of histories of Europe, lots and lots of them, and there's quite a lot of Europe in this book, probably too much. And so I kind of got a great big chalkboard and wrote, where do I need to go So one of those places was somewhere in Africa. I need to visit Africa during these travels, because people don't, and Africa has a fascinating and rich history. And then I started reading about things in Africa, and that one just jumped out as, oh, there's an emotion there, definitely, because the whole thing happened because of a kind of rage, a kind of anger. So yeah, that's the one where you can't avoid the emotions in it, because a lot of historians, particularly of Africa, try very hard to be very, very, very reasoned. And no, there's no emotions. Everything happens in history because people did logic. They drew a logic table before they went to war, and you're like, no, I don't think so. But sometimes they can't help it when it's like, well, this woman literally shot at the men in her tribe because they wouldn't rebel, and said, if you don't do it, we women will, you useless sods. And off she went, So that's how you just spot these things. And also, just she's a badass. So I had to include it in the book.
Stood out immediately. I mean, I've got a hard copy of the book. People go and buy it.
Oh, I know.
But I've been listening to it on the audiobook version of it, and when I've been doing my long drives to work and between work and whatnot, and it's fascinating, and the humor and everything injected into it. It's quite a serious subject when it comes down to it, but there's so much humor injected into the book and the stories, and that one's just one that stands out. The phrasing and everything is so it's brilliant, and it's from a perspective, even from the simple perspective of things that we like look back through history and think it's all very patriarchal, and that shows that that's not always the case. It's not uniform geographically that we came from patriarchal society.
No, I mean, it's still kind of a patriarchal society. They just have this strong women who can take over if they have to. It's like someone once, I used to live in Tunisia for a while, and I remember somebody once asking a guy who's in charge. Is it a patriarchal society? And this man thought for a while and went, in Tunisia, men wear the trousers because their wives tell them they must. And I thought, well, yeah, that's kind of the same there.
We all know that. We all know that feeling.
But yeah, it's different. Like everything else, different cultures have different ways, and we do. The other reason I wanted to get out of Europe was to say, look, there are other ways of feeling out there. This sort of very European. This is how feeling works, and all this. A lot of the science, which I rail on quite a bit, as you know, you've read the book, is very, very North American and Europe. And you get beyond that, and things are different. Japan has its own way of feeling. China has its own way. Russia has its own thing. So I've rambled as usual.
Rambling is very welcome. It's fine.
I do this, and it ends up being a book. It's weird. But the humor in it really was all the time. I'm always channeling the great Douglas Adams, the greatest philosopher who ever lived. So I try to channel Douglas, don't always succeed. And sometimes my editor goes, oh, it's a little bit glib. And I'm like, oh, but that's funny. So I have to tone it down a bit, but that's the aim. I want people to read it,
Yeah. And as you said earlier, there are... there's someone who you quoted earlier, Antonio Damasio, who's quoted in your book as well. And his books are fantastic. That's why I just turned around to remember his name, because I've got a couple of his books myself. It's fantastic. They are exceptionally dry. They are slogs to get through. So it's nice to have this subject talked about in a less academic way, which is more accessible for people.
Yeah, I think that's important. I think it's if you want people to be interested in a subject, you have to speak to them. You have to tell stories, and that's the big thing about me. I like to tell stories. I like to tell things as a story, not just bombard people with facts. There's plenty of bombarding with facts in the book for the people that like that kind of thing, but I wrap them in a story.
Yeah.
So, because it just whenever I read that kind of stuff, like Antonio, he's fantastic, and he's not an unfunny man outside his writing, right? But his writing is brilliant, but academic. And there's a lot of other people out there who are the same. There's some fantastic writers in my field. like Jan Plamper, who wrote the sort of intro to the history of emotions. Amazing book. Not something you'd read on the beach, though. You know, it's very technical. There are exceptions. My supervisor, Thomas Dixon, he reads fantastic books that anyone can read. So again, I'm kind of channeling him a little bit. Don't tell him I said that. Oh God, he might see this. But anyway, so yeah, I think it's important in science communication that you communicate.
Yeah.
Don't just talk at, you know?
Yeah, definitely. At the beginning of the book, you explained that humans don't feel emotions, and that's a modern idea in a cultural construction. Now, that I'm sure will come as a shock to many, many people. So can you expand a little bit on what you mean by that?
Oh, yes. Well, in the year 1800, there was a guy called Thomas Brown. Now, some people may hear Thomas Brown, those of you who read a lot like I do, go, oh, is that the guy with the sort of the pots of dead people and all that? No, not that Thomas Brown. Different Thomas Brown, not the guy from Norwich, another guy. This Thomas Brown was trying to solve a conundrum. The conundrum is, how do we separate feelings from thought? Something that people have been trying forever. And he came up with this idea that the passions, as they were known at the time, they were a type of feeling. There were also sentiments, and there were effects, and all sorts of different little categories. Sometimes you felt it in your body, then you thought about it. Sometimes you thought something was bad, and then you acted on it. They're all different categories of feeling. And he came up with this one that was, it's like seeing. You don't think about seeing, you just see. You don't think about hearing, you just hear. You don't think about feeling, you just feel. And they are motions outwards. And what happens then is an emotion outwards, an emotion, which he nicked from the French, from Descartes specifically. And that became this category into which we put certain feelings, those feelings that take less thinking about. So hunger doesn't count because we think about hunger quite a bit. I do, that's the certain. Well, we think about hunger quite a bit. But disgust, which you would think is the opposite of hunger, that does fit in the box because you just go and don't really think about it. And so that's why it's a category. And it doesn't mean the things in it aren't real. It just means the box we put them in is just a box, like so many things, to help us look at them. And what makes it worse is, as of about 1991, I think it was, somebody did a paper looking into the definition of emotion and found there were well over 100 different definitions being used by emotion science, and it hasn't got better, unfortunately. There are now many more, because every single emotion paper starts with, we define emotion as, you know, no, another one, just decide, guys, just pick one. So yeah, it's a built up thing, and they've invented them.
I have a lot of conversations surrounding atheism and theism, and you get a similar kind of thing with the definition of atheism. Everybody wants to kind of have their interpretation of what it means, and of course it has many, many different meanings depending on what context you're using it in.
Yeah, and there's lots of people constantly trying to define it. Theists are the best for that. They're constantly defining it for us. So maybe we should just leave them to it. Yeah, you're right. I really do believe in God. I just repress him because I want to sin, which is why I don't sin. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
But yeah, it is very similar in that atheist is it's kind of a box into which everybody who doesn't believe in a God or gods is put, and we all have our own reasons for not believing, our levels of not believing, our own reasons why we don't believe. Some of us, like me, think that everything but a deist God is definitely not true. You can absolutely demonstrate it, because every single time someone tries to describe a God, it's incoherent, so off with you. Whereas other people say, no, that's going too far. You know, maybe Yahweh does exist. But yeah, it's a similar kind of thing. That
other gods are available.
Other gods are available, yeah.
Yeah, so you slightly touched upon something when you were answering that question, but you say in the book that your main field of study is disgust. And the blurb describes you as one of the world's leading experts on disgust and emotions. How does somebody become an expert in disgust? And how unpleasant is it doing the research in a field which is quite literally disgusting?
Well, the second half first. The thing about disgust is we love it. We love it. Some of our funniest humour, way back to the Rabelais writings, where you've got comedies about giants using swans' necks to wipe their arses. This is from the 14th century, you know. There's actually a wonderful old translation of one of the rare, from their side, books about the Crusade, or documents about the Crusade, and it's this Arab on an island, and this runner comes up to him and says, "The Crusaders are attacking," and then the Sultan just cocks his leg and farts and says, "That's about as useful as what you've just said." And so this kind of, we love it, really. But so that was easy. It's like, oh, that's disgusting. Show me more, kind of thing. How I got into it, good old Dawn, that we both know. For many years, and she doesn't mind me saying, she's had emetophobia, which is a phobia of vomiting, to the point where she was at one point misdiagnosed with OCD because she cleans everything 5, 6, 7, 8 times. She very rarely eats out unless she's eaten there before, which is a complicated thing, but that's what happens. And she's done a lot of treatment for it. She's better now, to the point now where I have to remind her that somebody throwing up is supposed to be a bit yucky. If she starts to enjoy it, then we need another therapy to go on. And that's kind of weird. That's the sort of serial killer territory. So we don't want to go there. But I wanted to understand it. And I was a historian who was fascinated by, who was kind of a linguist and a psychologist as well. So I thought, well, I'll look at disgust. And I started off back in the days of my undergraduate. I did a paper on witches and disgust and got like stupidly high mark, sort of nobody ever gets that higher mark kind of mark for that essay, and thought, hey up, I'm onto something here. So it led from there. I then pursued it right through to the degree, and now I'm the disgust guy, as I always say.
Disgust guy.
Yeah, as I tend to say in my talks, people in my field, apparently when they think of something disgusting, they think of me. It's whatever that means.
Yeah, I think that's a backhanded compliment. So how big is the field of discuss then? Is that something that a lot of people are in, or is it a niche market?
Growing. When I started, it was mine. It was kind of mine. There are a few other people who'd written books on the subject, and that was about it. But now there's a few of us out there. Dan Kelly and a few other people that I know them all. That's how small a community are. We discuss, guys and gals stick together. We lost one of the greats, Valerie Curtis, just over a year ago to cancer, sadly. But she was a disgustologist, and she was one of those people who had half a dozen master's degrees and a PhD and a half. And she actually used to use it to go out to Africa to create programs to teach tribes about soap and cleanliness to stop the spread of Ebola and diseases and things. Yeah. So she was amazing. And it's one of the things I'd love to get into if we can find a way to find the time and talk to the charity and say, I can do that now. You know, there are others, there are more of us, not just Val anymore. So there is a kind of a growing fascination with it, and more books coming out there about it. I'd love to do a kids book. I've got an idea for a kids book, but I'll keep that secret for now. But I think, yeah, it is a fascinating field because we're finding new things about it all the time. Just the other week on the very same, was it the ATS Experience or was it The Line? I've forgotten his name. The guy who is a high school science educator. Yeah. He started talking about disgust. Now I wanted to contact him and say, I know you meant well, lovely, but everything you just said was wrong. So do you want me to explain it? Why it was wrong? Because it was basically, I know what he was doing. He was quoting a paper that I know very, very well, the Haight Macaulay Rosen paper from 1998 that says certain things. And I can see where he got it from. Great paper, but it's not 1998 anymore. So that's when I talked to him. Mate, no. Moral disgust and physical disgust isn't the same. No, not quite. Kind of is. Anyway, but yeah. So it's a subject that matters because it comes up on things like the ATS Experience, and it comes up in discussions about morality, and it comes up in discussions about all sorts of other things because it is linked to it. So I just find disgust is so easy to look at. Yeah. I also like to eat insects in front of people just to see them react. You know, it's kind of.
Yeah, I remember a time when I don't know if I should tell this story publicly. I remember a time when before me and my wife were married, and she had a housemate when she was living in Unidigs, and one of them was scared of spiders. So I saw a spider crawling across the house. I put it on my tongue and started chasing around the house.
Yeah.
But I've grown up now, so I don't do that kind of things now.
Yeah.
Much.
I believe you.
So you read the audiobook yourself, talking about that. I've listened to the audiobook, and it is funny, like I mentioned, and I had to chuckle when you remarked the emotional community of Barnsley as one of stoic manliness.
It is certainly.
Your book is interspersed with humour. So how do you find narrating your own book? And were there any particular parts you look forward to recording for the audiobook?
There were when I started. I've got to tell you, if anyone out there has not ever thought about doing an audiobook, it is hard. I had a director and a recorder, especially because of COVID. I was supposed to go out to New York or somewhere and record it and be in a room with a director. That couldn't happen. So I was in a hermetically sealed booth, and another guy was in a hermetically sealed booth, and my director was over the internet talking to me as a disembodied voice in the air. And it's hard enough without that. Every single day, I don't know if you know of vocal zones that singers use to look after their voice. I basically down them like some kind of mad addict every evening. Come on, go on. It's been a tough one today. So it's very hard working. You have to be absolutely precise, and some of those pronunciations were fun. I was really pleased because when I got to the bit where I'm talking about the different aspects of Hindu belief, I got through the entire paragraph, the difficult paragraph, and if you read my book, you'll know what I mean. I got through it in one go. I was so proud of myself.
Yeah, I'm proud of you because I've done a show on Buddhism before and touched on some of those pre-Hindu kind of characters that were around at the time of the Buddha, and I'll tell you, I've done several takes to get those names right. They are tongue twisters.
They are. I wasn't so lucky later in the book, but it's okay there. Usually when I come across someone called Smith and I go, and director goes, we need to do that again. You don't say. But yeah, it's good. I'm glad that I did it. I'm glad I did it myself. But it was very hard. It's a very, very tough thing to do. So if anyone out there is thinking of doing an audio book, it's like doing a YouTube video, except you've got to actually get it right.
Yeah.
Every single bit of it. And you've got to perform at the same time, and you've got to hope you don't drift off, which you do. You find yourself kind of drifting off and thinking about tea as you're talking eventually. While you're still performing. I've heard comedians, I think Roman Ince talked about this, that once he'd done a show so often, he was doing the lines in the comedy and at the same time thinking about what he's going to go have for tea and what book he's going to buy tomorrow and when the last train is, because it becomes just repetitive skill like anything. But I'm glad I did it.
So neuroscientist David Eagleman describes emotions as measurable physical responses caused by things happening, in contrast to feelings being the subjective experiences that sometimes accompany these bodily markers. Would you agree with that?
I think that's just one of these hundreds of definitions. It kind of works. They all work, from a certain point of view. I think that what you've got to be careful of, and Eagleman does this quite a bit, though not as badly ever since Lisa Feldman Barrett has had a word, there's these ideas that you have emotion circuits. This circuit does that, this circuit does that, this circuit. That's kind of not how they work. It's an all brain and body thing. You sense something and your body processes it, and then you feel what that processing tells you, if you like. You appraise that. And each culture has a different word for the thing it's appraising. That's nearly the same, but not quite for that feeling. So, yes, it's a bodily response to input, but so is, I don't know, belching in a certain of a way. Does that come under his, you've had input, haven't you? And you're having a bodily response to it. So you've got to be careful with these definitions. You can kind of include anything. I think definitions aren't useful. I just go with feelings because that covers everything we feel. and is different to everything we think. Although, as you say, you've read Damasio, so maybe not entirely. But yeah, so you have you don't have to then try and create this emotion thing, which is just a fake box, and try and get your own definition of it. Just feelings. We feel stuff. That's it. What definition of feelings is? We feel stuff, and everything gets easy then.
Yeah, simplify to communicate is probably
yeah, and to study. If you're trying to, I mean, get a tight definition to study if you like, but then you have to leave things out. You have to decide what to leave out and why you're leaving it out. Whereas if you just say it's feelings, then you kind of the shackles are off, and you can go. What about hunger? That's a feeling. Can we study it the same way we do disgust? Well, actually, yes, we can. What about physical pain as well as emotional pain? Can we study them next to each other? Well, actually, yes, we can. And everything gets just smooth.
Did you find these kind of many hundreds of tight definitions problematic in writing the book? Did you have to negotiate your way through them, or did you have kind of an understanding already of what they meant?
I know what they mean. I know they're all getting a similar thing. They're all trying to, basically what they're doing is they're saying, we found this thing out about emotions. And so we need to make you understand that according to us, this is an emotion. So they sort of will retrofit a definition that fits very perfectly with the study they've done, which again, if they just say these are feelings, they won't need to do that. That's fine. So I am aware of most definitions of emotion. And from Descartes onwards, and yeah, you definitely negotiate them a bit, but I tend to just ignore them, and just go with the feelings themselves.
Yeah.
Other things, otherwise things get really complicated, and people argue that you've left their definition out. Yeah. Oh, okay. Fine. The one I don't go with is stimulus response. I hear that quite a lot. That emotion is just a stimulus and a response, because that's just a response.
Yeah.
And emotion's got more to it than just run away. So yeah.
Make sure you're wearing faster shoes, faster running trainers than the man who's next to you who's been chased by the lion with you.
Yep.
As Billy Connolly would say.
Yeah.
So neurology and psychology both play a big role in the study of emotion.
Yeah.
They're both fields that you speak about in the book. And they are also fields where we still have a lot of work to do in understanding the mechanisms and makeup of the human self.
Yes.
So how do you think the study of emotion will be affected by these fields moving forward? And are there any new ideas about emotion that are being discussed in these fields that are exciting you?
Not so much the ideas. I mean, there's the whole notion of the third way, the idea that emotions are a culturally constructed thing that evolved, rather than having to decide whether it's an evolved thing or a cultural thing. No, the actual cultural construction of emotions is what evolved. That is really interesting me, the whole psychological construction of emotion, where your brain builds it, which is it goes to the 90s, which in science is yesterday. So it's but it's really taken off now. What's really interesting me is new ways of looking at emotions, looking at ways of studying emotion, not just emotion, other psychological things. Because up until now, the best we've had is, and I've had this done to me, you go into a room, they put you in a row, take all the metal off you, they lay you down, they strap your head still, they put a microphone and a thing over your face, they put you in a huge, great metal tube that goes, and then they say to you, we'd like you to feel as you normally would. And you're like, yeah, I'll do that. Okay. But now there are things like tracky putting just old EEG kind of stuff on people and putting them in virtual reality and putting them in certain situations and seeing what happens there, and all sorts of miniaturization of things. There's even somebody who's developed a wristband that can change color depending on your heart rate and your voice tone and the sweat you produce, to try and track your feelings as you go. So basically we can start tracking emotions in the real world when you're actually having them, not strapped to a tube, And that I find really exciting, because that's where it is. I forgot who it was, but someone once described the study of emotion as currently being like stood outside a factory looking at the lights in the windows going on and off and trying to work out what their accounts are. It's sort of, but we might be able to start getting into the building, soon, which is great and really exciting. And the other thing, of course, is AI and artificial emotions, which scares the bejesus out of me, to be quite honest, for all sorts of reasons. Some of them are political. The use of facial recognition to track your emotions and decide whether you're wronged or not when you're in an airport scares me, because people have been trying to do that and it doesn't work, because everyone's scared in an airport because it's an airport. Everyone's a bit funny, but also you can't track people like that. People have different expressions. Worse than that are things where they are tracking in certain parts of the world that I won't mention. Let's just say they are a less democratic part of the world. They have a certain section of that population who are being monitored, and if they are expressing themselves incorrectly, are being retrained to express themselves correctly. That's really not good. Because their culture expresses differently. It doesn't mean it's wrong, it's different. I want that on a t-shirt, because that seems to be the tagline for everything. It's not wrong, it's different. That stuff worries me. It worries me that we're going to start having emoting in order to not get in trouble. So we're going to all express ourselves in a certain way. And that's not good, because we're the rich variety of humanity is great. Let's not ruin that.
No, let's not. I've just asked about psychology and neurology, but you talk a lot about language in your book as well, and how that relates to emotion. So how do you see that, the study of that, progressing in future in relation to emotion?
Well, that's one of the really interesting areas. Myself, back in the days when I did a PhD, I recommend it to anybody who can do one. It's a great thing to do. But I used a bit of a Python code to rip instances of certain words and the words around them from a database of about 1.5 million books from the 15th to the 18th century. And it was study of language and use of language using corpus linguistics and modern tech. And that's really interesting that we can do that. That would have taken me a lifetime of study once. Whereas it took me an afternoon of the simplest code you can imagine, pressing go and getting all these tables of that. These were in 5 words of that word. These were in 5 words of that word, and then going to some of the books to see just how they're used in context and stuff like that. That's great. I think the way tech is looking at language is really interesting. But again, it's also got a dark side in that advertising companies are using this tech to find out how you feel and sell to you when you're feeling using certain language. They track your emotions, or try to. The good news is they're really crap at it, so nothing's happening at the moment. They think they're good at it, but they aren't. Which is why you get those random ads on Facebook for things that it's like, why am I getting a walrus cleaning kit? What the hell is this about? It's just really terrible. But it is, and languages. I mean, one of my supervisors was the head of the linguistics department, so I'm a weird hybrid. Most of us are, and so language is very important to emotions. Language is how we label our feelings, and there's a weird phenomena that you can describe another culture's emotion and give people the word for it, and they will suddenly go, yeah, I felt that, I get that. It happened to us in England in the last couple of decades with Schadenfreude. That was like feeling pleasure at someone's misfortune, where we all went, yeah, get that, I understand that, I know that's right. We all do that. And there are others that if you look at lists of alien emotions, as some people call them, you go, yeah, I see that. Haji, a Japanese kind of shame for doing something that you wouldn't normally do. Oh yeah, I felt that. That kind of shame. So language is really important part of the whole emotional process, that construction I talked about. Language is the sort of, if you like, the pin that everything feeds into, the memory that creates an emotion, the heuristics that understand what this feeling, how you're supposed to respond to this feeling, the context that you're in. All this stuff comes together, and then we take a word and go, it's that. Right? So words matter in this whole thing. But yeah, there's some great stuff going with the study of language. Some scary stuff too, but that's emotions.
Yeah. You are talking about language. You are doing a number of speaking dates to talk about the human history of emotion. I'll put a list of those up on the screen over the next couple of minutes so people can digest them, and I'll also put them in the link in the description. So how are you going to compress this book? Because this is packed full of information, which we talked about. And the audio book clocks in at 11 hours and 36 minutes. And it goes from the dawn of civilization all the way to the modern day. How are you going to compress that into a podium talk? And what areas do you intend to focus on?
I focus on basically three things. Firstly, I focus on what people think emotions are. That part of the book, because that's kind of it. That's where you need to start, isn't it? Yeah. What are feelings? What are they? What are the arguments? What are the three main big arguments for emotion? And then, as an example, I go into my comfort zone. I go into disgust. I'm going to disgust you if you come to my talks. You're going to be disgusted, and if you're not, that's scary. But I'll explain why in the talk. If you're really disgusted, that's even scarier. I'll also explain that. I will tell you, I will use disgust to find out whether you're a good person or not during the talk, and various other things. So there's that bit, and then I go and talk about history and how an emotion like disgust, one called abomination, that goes right back to Hebrew notions of sin and what God's sin is, and what it actually is, as opposed to this nebulous thing that the likes of Ray Comfort talk about. It's actually, there is a thing that it is. It's that which makes God disgusted. Those actions which make God go, yeah, basically. And how that played a role in certain events in history, particularly with the witch trials. So that's what I do, and because that gives you kind of a taster, and then you can go and get the book and read the rest. Yeah.
Yeah, I imagine when you're trying to sell a book, giving the whole book during the pre-sale period is probably not the best marketing strategy.
If somebody wants to hear me do an 11-hour talk, there's an audio book available on Audible. And
it is very good. Go out and buy it.
Yeah, do, please. I like food. I like rent.
I imagine when you mentioned just a minute ago that you kind of relate it to the people in the audience. I imagine you have people in the audience kind of doing this kind of thing when you get to that part of it.
I love the reaction is always kind of different, and I look around the room and see there are those who lean in and those who lean away, and it's really quite interesting to see people's reaction, because that in itself is the whole disgust isn't universal. People have different disgust thresholds. People are disgusted by different things. People understand revulsion differently. I can just do it to a room and say, there you go. You did that, you did that, you did that, you did that, you did that. So how universal is that?
That's brilliant. You are no stranger to live performance. And I mentioned earlier that we first met through your wife, who's a musician. And yes. I know that you also enjoy a live performance as a musician. So what are the differences in performing on stage in a band and standing there being the center of attention and the leading expert in your field?
Actually, funny enough, being a bit of a stage hound helped prepare me, because people are like, how do you do these talks? How come do you not get nervous? I'm like, well, it's kind of what I do and what I've done since I was about 14. Get up on stage and show off. It's just, it's in me. It's like that line from Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. If there's anything bigger than my ego, I want it caught and shot now. So I just play on that. I channel my inner Zaphod And and I always have, and so I do it with talks as well. I just find them comfortable. I just like it. I like the interaction. I like in the same way, and I like audiences, and I like being looked at, which is, people don't like looking at me necessarily, but I like being looked at. So
do you find that you get in the zone then when you're speaking as you would do as a musician?
I do, yeah. Sometimes I find I'm just sort of there, and I'm just performing and doing the thing. Now, especially now I've settled on my talk a bit, it's always changing, but you do a few and they're crap, and you're like, no, that bit out, that bit in, get rid of that. No, that's the. And I did a few which had people going, there's too much information in that. Well, I was trying to do the entire book, in an hour. And so, yeah, it's, I don't know.
So on that point, you have done some dates already on this speaking tour. How have they been, and what's the most interesting responses or questions that you've had so far?
I have loads of questions, and I like the questions. The questions are some of my favourite bit. I actually did a talk at the Royal Institute a while back. When was that? February. It was a very early version of my talk, so I wasn't particularly happy with the talk, but I did like an hour's worth of questions. And I had one kid who must have been no older than 8 or 9, and he was a genius. He was fantastic. He was asking all these really fantastic questions. The questions like, can you separate emotions and reason? Is that actually possible? So I'm like, you need to read Antonio Damasio. Normally I wouldn't tell a 9-year-old to read Antonio Damasio, but you, kid, you're ready for him. And things like that, and I think the question that comes up quite often, there's always somebody there who will say to me, but surely what you're describing are just reactions, they're just responses. I'm like, but are they? And I'll have this discussion about what the difference is between a feeling and a response. That, response just happens, and the feeling is appraised, and then something happens. But yeah, I think it's probably who's asking me the question. If it's a 9-year-old kid, then I'm like, oh, you're awesome. Who also he came afterwards because he wanted to try some of my insects, so that was good. Can I have some? Looked at the mum and went, can I have some? She's like, yeah, of course I can. There you go. Oh, because there were mealworms. And he just went, oh, they're like pork scratchings makes popcorn. I'm like, yes, so they are. But that's brilliant. I like that.
That is brilliant. What kind of age ranges are you getting then at these talks?
Well, if it's a Skeptics in the Pub, it's your Skeptics in the Pub age range. My age and over. Sometimes some other things, I'll do things like Nerd Night, and they're a bit younger. Nerd Night in London is fantastic. It's 3 speakers, and you each give them 15 minutes, and you do your thing, and there are young people there, and there are older people there. Most people are in their 20s. Royal Institute's a mixed bag, but usually the things I do, it's usually my age and over, and sometimes a few are a bit younger. Because we're at the age where we read stuff, I guess. 20-year-olds read stuff because they have to, because they're doing a degree, and then you go for this period where you're like, enough of that, I'm not going to do that for a while, and then you start doing it again. So that's who I pick up.
I read too much, according to my wife. I get put on a book ban frequently, buying new books, but I just tend to ignore it usually. Just buy them and sneak them in and don't tell her about it.
I used to have so many books, and we had a house fire, and I sat there with the loss adjuster, and she said, how many books did you have? And I went, about 2,000. And she said, so these are academic books? And I said, yeah. She said, so retail brand new value, we're talking an average of 75 quid. And I said, so how much value did you lose in books? And I sat there, my brain would not do the equation.
No.
2,000 times 75, 2,000 times 75, 2,000 times 75. No, there's no way it's that much. It's like, that's about 3 times what I insured for the entire house. What's going on here? But yeah, so I've decided that paper burns. So most of my books are in my hard drive these days.
Yeah, but books and guitars are expensive hobbies.
Oh, tell me about it.
So what's next for you then? So you mentioned earlier about perhaps an idea for a children's book. Have you got any solid plans for a sequel? Or is it time to sit back and enjoy all the work you've done coming to fruition?
I have solid plans for a sequel, which I will be talking to the lovely publishing people about as of about September, once this one's had a bit of a time to gestate. And it is a sort of a sequel. That's what I'm talking about, AI, where emotions are going in the future, what emotions might be in 100 years' time. So I've done the history of emotions. I'm now going to do the future of emotions.
That's interesting.
Kind of interesting. Things like, I mean, I've always really found Blade Runner fascinating, because Blade Runner bizarrely gets emotions right in a way that almost nothing else does, in that it has these things that are created and they don't really have emotions, they just have sort of responses. But after 4 years, they can absorb and understand and develop emotions, which is the same as a kid. It takes between 4 and 8 years for a kid to develop and understand emotions as we understand them within a culture. And at that point, when they can properly do emotions, you can't trace them anymore. They'll just blend into society. So Blade Runner, that kind of idea of future emotions and being able to create something like that is really, really interesting to me. And there are people working on it. So,
So expect your next book to have a picture of Harrison Ford on the cover then.
Yeah, or Rutger Hauer, I don't know. Yeah, something like that.
Dr. Richard Firth-Godbehere here.
Yeah.
Thank you for joining me. It has been an absolute pleasure reading your book, which I'm going to show to everyone again.
I have an English version somewhere over there. Let me see if I can get there without pulling my headphones out. Oh, no, you're still there. So the English version looks like that. You've got the American one.
I've got the American one.
That's the British one. There are also lots of other languages, so if you don't speak English, I don't know why you're watching this, but anyway, you can get it in Dutch and all sorts of other anything. I think 22 languages so far.
That is brilliant.
Yeah, including
I think it was your Twitter page where I saw you holding one of your was it the Italian one?
The Italian one,
had come through, and you were showing us all that, and that was brilliant.
Yeah, I've got a Dutch one. The Dutch has the best title. The Dutch one is called Homo Emoticus, which I think is. I wish I thought of that back in the day, because that's what it would have been called. Although it does sound like something else, but yeah,
that is brilliant.
Spanish version is going to be called that as well when that comes out in September. So
yeah, I'm going to be putting all your information down there
cool.
in the usual places, and if anybody wants to know any more about you, just follow the links that I put down in the description.
It's not the large things that send a man to a madhouse. Death he's ready for, or murder, incest, robbery, fire, flood. No, it's a continuing series of small tragedies that send a man to the madhouse. Not the death of his love, but a shoelace that snaps.